Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host, Nithya Subramanian, an editor at the Institute. The Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation is an organization of 7 South Asian and Southeast Asian countries. It was set up in 1997 but became active only in late 2016. Recently, the Vivekananda International Foundation, New Delhi, brought out an edited volume titled BIMSTEC, The Journey and Way Forward. We have with us today Dr Sreeradha Datta, editor of this book. Dr Sreeradha is Center Head Neighbourhood Studies and Senior Fellow at BIF. She is also a non-resident Senior Fellow at ISAS. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
Let me start by asking you a little bit about the history of the BIMSTEC. The BIMSTEC, as I'd already mentioned, is about 2 decades old. So can you please share with our audience about this grouping's growth over the years and how successful has it been in achieving its missions and objectives?
Yes, certainly. BIMSTEC is actually 25 years old. And I guess many of us didn't realize it. While we were doing this book, it just kind of dawned on us. And let me, begin with kind of walking you through some of the milestones of this organization, which, as you just mentioned, came into being in 1997 in Bangkok. At that point of time, it was known as BIMSTEC because comprising members of Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and they were known as these members of economic cooperation, which was subsequently in December 97 when Myanmar joined this particular grouping, and that's when it got the nomenclature as BIMSTEC. But certainly it was only in 2004 when we see how Nepal and Bhutan was admitted into this grouping, and then the current nomenclature as we know it, which is the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation, came into being. And the first summit subsequently was held in Bangkok in July 2004. So from the time of its conception to the first summit, it was certainly a long walk. There were, of course, numerous meetings at various levels, ministerial certainly, but many officials and technical levels, and which was, culminated in the first BIMSTEC summit. The last summit was actually held in 2018 in Kathmandu. And we are now looking forward to the next summit, which is the 5th summit at Colombo end of this year. Of course, given the pandemic situation, there has been a bit of rescheduling of this. And, the secretariat was actually set up pretty late in 2014 in Dhaka. So essentially, it's, a unique kind of organization because for the first time we see economies of South Asia and Southeast Asia coming together for the first time to kind of collaborate and cooperate on a variety of mutual sectors. And what is interesting is that BIMSTEC is much less focused on geopolitics and much more on common regional concerns of economic and social development. So while economic cooperation was really identified as the core objective in the initial days, subsequently with time, technology was added. And over time, and as we discuss it later, we'll see that has actually added certainly a flavor to the organization. And presently, we have about 14 core areas of cooperation, which also include trade and investment, transport, communication, energy, climate change, public health, variety, including, of course, cultural cooperation and, people-to-people contact. But interestingly, each area of cooperation has been identified with different members, and each of them have been given specific responsibility to lead the specific sectors or interest groups. The question that you asked is how much has it done really? It's a fact that BIMSTEC has remained extremely low profile and a much under discussed regional association for larger part of its existence. And also, as you mentioned in your introductory remarks, that it's only just picked up momentum from 2016 when the Indian PM actually invited the leaders to a retreat in Goa. Also, if you recall, during his second swearing-in ceremony, all the BIMSTEC members attended that in Delhi, and I think there was a deliberate thrust being given to ensure that BIMSTEC picks up momentum. So if I'm looking at it right now, I would say there has been some evident progress. I mean, security cooperation has been significant. The dialogue has been ongoing. The periodic discussions are underway. And in fact, the first meeting of the BIMSTEC subgroup on countering radicalization and terrorism in June 2019 looks strong. In fact, that's a conversation which is ongoing, and I think members have constantly emphasized, and this is being the sensitive subject that it is, but I think each member kind of rallies around this and has also looked at how we could be using the internet and the social media to counter these radical activities which is all around us, not only inside BIMSTEC region but even around us. And also I think each member is interested in ensuring that we kind of use information technology and digital platforms to ensure that all of the member groups are on the same page and kind of take this forward. Interestingly, the other very I think a noted aspect of development has been the cross-border infrastructural facilities. This has, of course, been developed in the sub-region of South Asia, but India has also been pushing for the trilateral highway which connects India to Myanmar and Thailand. And the whole idea is that South Asian, Southeast Asian countries would now be able to trade with each other, and the commerce arrangements, the projects involving both these economies will ensure a possible economic integration. I mean, it holds promise. As of now, I can say that there hasn't been much headway in terms, but the fact that these developments, these cross-border infrastructure facilities are being put in place, it also would mean that in times to come, this would something that all would affect positively all the member countries. In fact, in this coming summit, we are hoping that the BIMSTEC master plan for transport connectivity is going to be adopted, which is also going to be, I think, a game changer of sorts. Apart from the fact that I think there are several MOUs which pertains to security aspects. So and also I think technology transfers are going to be signed. So 3 MOUs are slated to be signed for the summit. And over the years, we've seen that while there has been a lot of conversation on many core areas, climate change is something that everybody is worried about. And India has been hosting the BIMSTEC Center for Weather and Climate Facility, which every member agrees has been a very, very useful component for all of them, because it's been able to provide disaster early warnings and these kind of things which are critical in the region. So, and I just want to add here the other conversation which looks interesting, but of course this a particular author in this volume has discussed it very interestingly, is on the free trade agreement, which is again a conversation which had started long ago. But I think this chapter here is a bit cautionary. It says that while FTA in principle would allow for sufficient market access amongst the member countries, and whether it's goods, services, and investment, but I think there's a lot of work to be done, and essentially India and Thailand actually has to take the onus here, because they are the ones who are in a advanced stage of market access to most of what is already underway in the region. So I think, I would hope, and I think that BIMSTEC is poised at interesting times. And this summit, which we're expecting end of the year to be held in Colombo, would actually kind of, finalize many of these core issues which are being discussed.
Thank you for this wonderful overview. And I think you've covered a lot of topics that have also been dealt with in this book that you have edited. And we have also you also mentioned Prime Minister Modi calling the BIMSTEC members for his swearing in. So this ties in very well with my next question, which is that some analysts and watchers of developments in South Asia have commented that BIMSTEC has emerged as the preferred grouping of countries in South Asia. What are your thoughts on this?
Certainly, if you look at the past experience in South Asia, where we were not able to see much progress, BIMSTEC experience is different, because there is really no bilateral conflict here. I mean, the core issue, which was, unlike in SARC experience, there is no protracted bilateral difference within the BIMSTEC member countries, which was not the case in South Asia earlier. And this certainly lends to an environment which is of trust and goodwill. And what essentially BIMSTEC has been able to convey is that individually every member country is going to benefit by being in this group. And of course, the fact that there are three very rapidly growing Asian economies, India, Bangladesh, Thailand. And although certainly admit that the pandemic has put a spanner to many of the growth stories, but I think everybody is very happy to be in a situation where these rapidly rising economies are able to generate not only interest for engagement, but also open up opportunities which was not there earlier. So the sub-regional grouping of South Asia and Southeast Asia, which is, I guess, as I said, devoid of particularly any strong political conflict or tension, is likely to find that this growth stories is going to help each one kind of develop and enable to access what is they thought was potentially available in South Asia, which wasn't the case when we realized that it wasn't. I mean, political issues were holding us back. Hopefully in BIMSTEC, the fact that there's a whole range of cooperative sectors being discussed at various levels will take this momentum forward now onwards. And the lack of political tension, of course, is a major underlying reason as to why everybody is looking forward to pushing this regional organization.
But that apart, there have been several regional developments, such as the growing prominence of China, the uneasy relationship between India and China, the rise of smaller states such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. All these have actually put a spotlight on institutions like the BIMSTEC. Firstly, do you see China making a greater push for an entry into the BIMSTEC? And if so, what would India's reaction and response be to that?
In several of these think tank meetings that I've attended, I've seen how through some of the members, China has been pushing to become a member of BIMSTEC. I don't know whether it has been done at any official level or not really, but it is certainly a contentious issue. I mean, there is no doubt about the fact. And I recall at many of these think tank meetings where many of the member countries have suggested, and again at various levels, about how this other sub-regional organization that India was very much part of, which is the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar regional cooperation, which would also kind of weave in together very well with BIMSTEC. But given the fact that the Sino-Indian political tension which exists at this point of time, I really do not see India supporting any such move to accept China in the group. There is, again, as I'm saying, that several times in various of our at our level, think tank level, we've seen how members have often said that BIMSTEC would probably progress faster if we had China, which is actually kind of a region which is working with each member countries very effectively. But it is highly unlikely that India would support any such initiative at this point of time to include China in BIMSTEC. And I think it has often and quite rightly been argued that India's motivation to develop BIMSTEC is in fact driven by the fact that they don't want any detractions taking place. I mean, you've seen how Pakistan has stymied issues in SARC, and of course keeping China out is something which is important at this point of time, given the tension that India has with China. So while India is certainly trying to push the economies of South Asia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan to connect and integrate better with Southeast economies, I think the presence of China would certainly upset the balance that exists, and would also introduce an element of how would I say, tension, which I don't think right now. The fact that the regional process is in various processes of integration, various stages of integration, I would suggest that there would be any positive element in including China at this time. And I think member countries in BIMSTEC are probably in a better position to shape and deal with the regional issues now. and all of them are, I think, working together on a very positive platform for both to ensure cooperation at various levels and also at the organization structure. Right now, I think kind of a well-knit organizational structure is important to ensure that BIMSTEC's journey is, captures far greater momentum than it has in the past. And any element of including another bilateral tension would certainly stymie that process.
You rightly mentioned that several member countries of the BIMSTEC have been beneficiaries of China, especially the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. But at the same time, we are also seeing the US-led Indo-Pacific strategy playing out in the region. So, with growing Sino-American competition, what impact do you see? Do you think these developments will have on regional security and the BIMSTEC?
As you correctly noted, and I think apart from Bhutan and India, I think all the other countries are participating in, China's One Belt, One Road project. And but again, right here, India's reservations have been made very clear. And while India also, at the same time, I did mention earlier, has been, focusing, and there's a huge thrust being given on the building cross-border transport corridors, which is not only across South Asia, which is the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal region, but also with Myanmar, Thailand, and the Act East policy is only going to be supporting all these initiatives which are kind of appearing in the sub-region. So at the same time, while China also has been working very closely with all these economies and pushing for great infrastructure facility, I think India wants to kind of ensure the kind of infrastructure structures that it's building with all its neighbors will also push for a transport corridor and enable trade and transport to take off like never before seen in the region. While it's true that given the geopolitics of the time, that Quad also has been very active in the region. And I think at the same time, while Quad has been discussing various other activities, India has also been discussing many of these activities with the Bay of Bengal members, with the BIMSTEC members. And I think recently India convened a virtual meeting with the BIMSTEC members to discuss the naval exercise in the Bay of Bengal. So India is aware and recognizes what are the larger extra regional interests in the Bay of Bengal area and how it affects each and every BIMSTEC member country. But India is going to try and raise the momentum of the sub-region. I think that thrust, as we discussed from 2016, has been very, very obvious. And many of the projects that India is planning with many of its members are likely to also converge with the kind of policy that US has for the sub-region. We've seen how many of these, Asian ADB bank infrastructure projects and others are also coinciding with each other to kind of support that trade and commerce momentum that is going to, we hope that is going to be picked up very soon. At the same time, I think we do need to understand that how the Sino-Indian tension is real, and also how the members actually perceive and react to that does kind of pose a challenge for maintenance of peace and stability in the region. And I think we need to understand that and not put it under the carpet. I think it's a point in time when India, and I think India has been pretty clear about it, and also I think a frank conversation with all the members and how BIMSTEC can be benefited together is a conversation that is much required. And while we do understand the extra-regional issues which affect the Bay of Bengal area and this whole Indo-Pacific, but frank conversations, and I think everybody understands the causes for tension here, and meeting it, addressing it is probably a good way forward.
I would also like to touch upon the problems that Bangladesh and Myanmar are currently facing. They've both been affected by the coup and the Rohingya crisis. What impact will these developments have on the efficacy of the BIMSTEC to bring about social progress in the sub-region?
As you rightly say, this is certainly a very grave situation right now being faced by Myanmar, and not only about the coup, but also the large exodus of Rohingya which took place and which has certainly added some tension to the BIMSTEC grouping. I think it is important that we examine the role of BIMSTEC members and what is often perceived as their apparent lack of interest in pushing for a crisis resolution. I think this has caused heartburn in some of the BIMSTEC member countries, especially Bangladesh, who, as we know, has hosted the largest number of refugees, the Rohingya refugees from Myanmar, Rakhine region. So while at the same time, I would actually say here, and this is again given the fact that we've been part of many of these BIMSTEC think tank conversation, that both Bangladesh and Myanmar is convinced that while a Rohingya crisis is important and critical bilateral tension, which has potential to explode in the regional environment and in terms of the unrest and radicalization that many are drawing our attention to. But at the same time, it's not an issue that which would kind of hijack the positive momentum that BIMSTEC is now picking up. And we've also seen that this it has certainly a whole lot of implications for both the states, I mean, the bilateral countries involved in BIMSTEC, but also for the regional and global politics. But I think it is important that the affected states would right now need greater impetus to actually work towards resolving the crisis. And while they both sides have often agreed that it's no point ignoring it or being in denial, but we'll have to have smart thinking introduced to see how we can resolve the issue. And I think what many have suggested, and especially our friends from Myanmar, that there is a far greater political will at this point of time to establish closer cooperation amongst the member countries. And what I've seen is not only as diplomatic efforts at the government level, but several subnational levels, initiatives have actually ensured that the members are able to kind of do some out of box thinking about this particular problem, which is very, very important. And I don't think any of the members want that this particular, especially the Rohingya problem, dilutes the important developments that are taking place within BIMSTEC. But also we have to ensure that the conversation continues and ensures it doesn't assume the proportion that it can do when it's left unattended. At the same time, I mean, the reference to the coup has taken everybody by surprise. I mean, we know that, and there has been issues, and of course we are hoping that there is some kind of the anti-coup group that is coming in. There is some active engagement happening on that process. And we hope that while the pandemic has created havoc amongst all the countries, including BIMSTEC member countries, the coup added a very serious element to it. And with the kind of hardship that people have faced is, we've seen the images, which is really, really strong and sad. But I think it's time that the member countries and extra regional efforts are put in place. And while many have often seen how at times the hopelessness, the situation seems very hopeless, but I don't think it is. And I think what we need to understand is that the entire international community needs to stand with the people of the land and people of Myanmar, what they want. And I think right now, to deliver social and stability to them and ensure that the kind of economic progress that we saw this region was growing should not kind of fall on the margins just because of this political change that happened. Hopefully we are looking for stable times ahead. It's a difficult process. It's not something that we can do overnight, but I think all of the member countries are kind of at some level or the other trying to ensure, whether at a bilateral level, whether at conversations within the region or with extra regional members, to ensure that political stability in Myanmar is introduced. And I think the only way forward is to have some very, very constructive dialogue. By being in denial or by not having a conversation, we will only, we should learn from our past experiences where we've often not talked about political issues. And I think, and even here in this book, we are constantly talking about that how member countries need to be engaged in the process at various levels. And that's a whole positive element about BIMSTEC, that we don't necessarily have to do it at the government level, but there are many other opportunities that lie within the BIMSTEC members where we are able to look at the crisis through various multi-level prism and see how best we can kind of address these outstanding issues.
I think you have covered a lot with regard to the BIMSTEC, and I would really like to thank you for joining us at this podcast. I think we are in for some interesting times, so we will reconnect again and talk when there are more developments. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Sreeradha.
Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure to discuss this issue. And I look forward to, all of us engaging with the BIMSTEC process in the days to come forward. And I hope this particular book that we worked on for the last 1 year is going to be something which is of a different sort and, introduces elements. And it also, of course, I just want to add as a while finishing off, that this book actually kind of highlights many of the other issues that we could discuss in terms of taking this forward on a much more positive trajectory than what you've seen in the last 25 years. So hopefully the journey ahead will be much more constructive, much more positive, and will ensure tangible benefits for all the member countries working together on this common platform. Thank you, Nitya. Thank you, ISAS, for this opportunity.
You were listening to South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.